Okay, tonight's guest is a veteran in their field, having worked on such beloved TV productions as The In-Betweeners, this time with Alan Partridge, Big Train. I was really excited to see Big Train on your resume. I love that show so much. Afterlife, Ricky Gervais's Afterlife, and many more. But what we're perhaps most interested in talking about tonight is his work on 1992's Ghostwatch. So, welcome to the show, Mr. Richard Drew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Yeah, hello. How are you? All right.
Yeah, very, very hot. It's
Yeah.
unseasonably hot up in Manchester at the moment. Uh, okay, so Richard, again, thanks for joining us. Ken, did you want to start firing off some questions?
Yes. So as Gaz alluded to, you've had quite a storied history in British television. You've had a hand in some of certainly my favourite shows, up to including and after Ghostwatch, which we'll be talking about this evening mostly. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
There's
A
a
little
question.
bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been doing it 38 years now. I'm still sort of still busy-ish, not at the moment, weirdly. So there's a little bit of a hiatus at the moment. I've got something coming down the tracks, hopefully starting fairly soon. Started my career at the end of the 80s in BBC Wales. I'd been a student at Newport Film School prior to that, so that's kind of that's why I was sort of in Wales at that point. And then, you're finishing your film school course, looking for your first job, and BBC Wales and HTV Wales were the nearest TV stations, TV studios, and so that's where I badgered, and then got a break in BBC Wales, where I kind of did 5 months straight out of finishing film school as a quite almost like an apprentice, really.
Hmm.
Just learning the ropes on the job and getting paid, which was amazing considering I'd only finished, college 6 weeks before. Um, and then so that took me up to Christmas '88, and then Christmas '89 I started in BBC in London. So the first thing I ever did at Television Centre was a kids TV show called Tricky Business. Only ever did one series, I think, maybe two, and it was a kids show set in a magic shop. And then I went back to London, back to Wales, and did a proper contract this time. Then came back to London, and then that was 1990, BBC 1990. So I started my year doing the Les Dennis Laughter Show,
Oh
Oh, wow.
wow.
which was amazing, actually. It was amazing. Les was delightful. Lisa Maxwell was his kind of cohort. So, and it was sketch comedy. There was a dozen sets to turn around each week. Bit of location filming as well down in I want to say Hastings. It wasn't Hastings. It's on the coast. It'll come to me. Um, and it was a massive, massive learning curve. Turning around, quite big set pieces in a week's notice.
Hmm.
And we did a piss take of Dirty Dancing, and we did a big staircase sequence for a dance sequence. We did all kinds of stuff. So it was kind of, I always sort of say when my starting my career, it's almost like the last days of the empire of the BBC. It's sort of, I was very fortunate enough to work at Television Centre, which I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful of, because it was the
Yeah.
thing I watched like you guys as a kid, and
Yeah.
to get to work there was just quite extraordinary. Um, it all felt incredibly, incredibly familiar. Um, and then, but I did see the end of the empire. I did see the sort of, it's so slowly crumbling.
Mm.
And in that sort of 3 years at the BBC, then I did, as I said, I did Les Dennis Laugh Show. Then I did Bergerac for a year. Straight after
Wow.
that, so I went straight on from Les Dennis straight on to Jersey and France, and
Bergerac.
did 9 months on
It's
Bergerac, which was amazing, and again a massive learning curve. I'd never done a straight drama before. I was sort of art directing. Then I was brought down with a bump and did Going Live and then Grange Hill the following
going
year.
live and oh
Going
wow.
live. Oh,
So I
God.
So
did that, with
So your career is my entire childhood, basically.
Yeah, mine, yeah.
I'm definitely at that age now. Yeah, I mean, I lecture at I do lectures at colleges, and with kids who are 18 and 21, and I talk about these shows, and of course they have no idea, and even the
Mhm.
in-betweeners, they have no idea. You know what I mean?
Oh,
The
Yeah, I,
wow.
I
older
was
you
thinking
do
this
it,
when
you think, oh God, you don't even know this. Your kind of cultural point where they'll latch onto you and go, oh yeah, I know that show. Um, so I did that, and then I did a couple of sitcoms. I did On the Up, which was a Dennis Waterman sitcom with Joan Sims and Sam Kelly was in it, and I did One Foot in the Grave, and that was probably then that was the last thing I did at the BBC in that run. So I had a kind of 4 year run. One Foot was kind of. I think a lot of fans think it's quite a good series. The one I did, it's the one with the dog where he picks the dog up, in the phone, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
series I did, and the plant that's found in the downstairs loo and all of that stuff. So I was sort of around for all of that, and that was good. We had a big flooding restaurant to do for the last episode where the firemen come in, and so building a restaurant set in a studio in front of an audience with water. Water in studios is always quite difficult.
imagine
Um,
it'd be quite dangerous if you don't do it
yeah,
properly with all
it's
the
bloody
electrics and
dangerous
whatnot.
because you're surrounded by electrics,
Yeah.
and also all studio floors, it sounds very technical, but all studio floors are laser leveled, i.e. they're very, very flat. So water will just keep running until it hits a wall because it has nowhere to stop. It doesn't puddle.
Hmm.
It just keeps going. So yeah, water in studios is quite dangerous. And in amongst that time, which obviously we're going to talk about, is Ghostwatch. So that was in '92. So I sort of sandwiched Ghostwatch in between, essentially On the Up and then One Foot in the Grave. So yeah, that's kind of that was that time, and it was interesting with the BBC then because you kind of I didn't get interviewed for it. I was just available. You kind of I was a pool of freelance assistants. So the BBC back in the day had a staff art department, which were designers, art directors, prop buyers, petty cash buyers, all the kind of departments, and they were all on staff. But sometimes those people were on holiday, took years sabbaticals. So that's where freelancers were able to sort of get a foot in the door. And back in the day, BBC, ITV in the regions, it was kind of that was your only way into telly, really. It was, I was they gave us this rather grand title of a holiday relief assistant. That's what you were known as, and so that's kind of how I got my first break down there. And then once you were in, then you're on kind of rolling contracts. Really, they would never keep you on for a full year because then they have to pay you, and you were looped into pension schemes and all that kind of stuff. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
they always finish your contract just shy of a year. So then you never got those kind of
And hired you
benefits.
back a month later or something.
Pretty much, pretty much. And then yeah, so and I'm rambling now. So yeah, that was all the BBC
No,
stuff. And
not
then
at all.
I met a production designer, a couple of production designers who were outside of the BBC. One of those was James Dillon, and one of those was Dennis DeGroot. And basically, those were the guys that I then worked with pretty much. There was a couple of other people, Dave Ferris, Helen Scott, other production designers. But pretty much James and Dennis between them kept me quite busy as their assistant until 1998. And I was dipping my toes into designing stuff. And then the 11 o'clock show came along in 1998.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was actually, that was oddly a job that Dennis had sort of has offered. And he was busy doing loads of other things for Talkback. And he just said to me, Rich, do you want to do it? And that's kind of how that happened. I just happened to be in the right place, the right time. Obviously, worked with Dennis a number of years by that point. I mean, Dennis is a bit of a legend. James is a legend. James designed the Crystal Maze. I did the Crystal Maze, the original series. I mean, James is set for Taskmaster, just won a BAFTA at the weekend, so he's still
Hmm.
very, very current. Dennis is now retired. So I was really, really fortunate to just meet those two guys. And a lot of people I know in the industry now are people I sort of met through those two guys. So I just had a blast. I was doing all kinds of stuff. Did Game On, I did a sitcom. I did another sitcom with Dennis called A Perfect State. But I was doing music shows, magic shows. I worked on Reeves and Mortimer with Dennis. Smith and Jones with Dave. I
Oh,
I was very fortunate to work. Actually, my comedy heroes, all the people I
yeah, yeah.
grew up watching, I got to work with them. It was amazing.
That's
And yeah,
incredible.
I
so
mean,
1998, 11 o'clock show, and then that's kind of from that, as you alluded to, my CV, kind of everything else followed. But that was kind of basically the point where I just thought, do you know what, I can't assist anymore. I need to now say I'm designing, and that was it. And actually, a lot of people who started on the 11 o'clock show are either running television now or basically, on camera almost all the time. So oddly, that's how I knew Ricky.
Yeah,
Jimmy Carr, I've done a lot of work with, and Jimmy started on the 11 o'clock show. Obviously, Sacha Baron Cohen started on the 11 o'clock show. But Dave Gorman, Stuart McConey, there was loads of people worked on that show. Endemol and not Endemol, Zeppotron, a TV production company, was born out of the 11 o'clock show. The In-Betweeners guys were all
yeah.
producers on the 11 o'clock show. And
oh,
and Boark was formed out of the 11 o'clock show. So a lot of stuff came from that one production, and I was just, very grateful to be part of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'd
it's
forgotten
an
all about the 11 o'clock show.
yeah, and it's an it's an iconically designed show as well. I can close my eyes and think of like watching the 11 o'clock show and all the skits that they did and
Oh,
the set design and really and all the other stuff that you kind of mentioned in your career, specifically like the Crystal Maze. This is like, I mean, there's a Crystal Maze attraction in Manchester. I went to it on a work
There is.
a work event recently. So, this is stuff that's been adapted into an amusement for other people to visit. It's that good. So,
yeah. Well,
um,
they weirdly they used to do, because the set was what we call set standing. So when I did the last 2 years on it, and I think it ran for 6 series. So the first couple of series, I think it was done at Shepperton. So they put the set up and took it down, and then they moved to this aircraft hangar in Harlow called Aces High Hangar, and it was permanently set. And they used to do corporate events in the summer months because it was filmed at the end of the year. So it was a sort of September to December sort of job. Um, but yeah, I mean, kind of way ahead of it, weirdly, way ahead of its time. They used to do corporate training weekends on the Crystal Maze set where people would run around and and win crystals, you know, immersive before the word was invented.
Yeah.
before that was ubiquitous. Yeah. Okay. I could talk about your career for hours and hours and hours, but we'll focus down onto the iconic. I don't think I said at the beginning as well, but thank you for traumatizing me when or taking part in something that traumatized me
And
for
me.
I
And
couldn't sleep for weeks and months.
from what I've been hearing on social media, it's not just us. It's like an entire generational trauma thing.
Oh, it really is, and it's yeah. Sorry, I'm talking over you. I'm so sorry.
That's
So
all.
no,
Yeah, it really, really is, and because as I said, a couple of minutes ago, I didn't interview for the job. I was available, and Ken, who production designed it, I just happened to be in his office, and he just said, "Oh, do you fancy doing it?" It was kind of that simple, and I don't know at the time doing it. I mean, I suspect people do ask me, "Oh, did you know it was going to be this thing?" Of course not. Nobody had a clue.
Yeah.
It was just a job. It was a job that finished, you know, did a period of time. For me, it had come off the back of a sitcom, and it was about to go into a sitcom. I was about to go on to a sitcom afterwards. So it was just a job, to kind of pay the bills. And I don't mean to sort of, that lightly. I'm just, that's all it was. And it wasn't a particularly long shoot. I think it was only about a 4 or 5 week shoot. And the prep time was only about 4 or 5 weeks. So maybe it was a 10-week job from start to finish, which is quite,
Right.
quite quick. By the time you're in your groove with it, it was all already up and running.
so given, I mean, it's an interesting show because it is incredibly straightforward in terms of design. It's you've got a traditional, I guess, talk show, variety show set that Park
The
is on,
studio environment.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then just a suburb, like a terrace house.
Yes.
But I guess I don't know if this was a known challenge for you when you were on the job, but this is a show that even today, and it's just been released in special edition deluxe 4K. This is a show that people pore over and like stare at the sets and every single little corner and every single little line, looking for an appearance of pipes, looking for a moving item. Like, was that a unique challenge while you guys were working on it, or was it just kind of let's just do it normally and see what
I seem
happens?
to remember the appearances of Pipes was they're scripted, and it was just kind of coming up with ways to do them. So I mean, obviously, I wasn't the production designer; I'm the art director on the job. But it was only
Mm,
myself and Ken. Ken Starkey was the set designer, sadly no longer with us.
mm.
Um, Ken worked on the very famous Some Mothers Do Have 'Em episode with the car on the edge of the cliff. That's one of Ken's. That's
Oh
Ken
Oh,
wow.
came up. Ken devised that. And oddly, I did a comic relief thing in sport relief thing in 2012, and I ended up using. And I didn't realize we recreated a sequence with Michael Crawford and the car. And I got this car from an action vehicle company. Turned out to be the same car the BBC had owned, and we didn't know when we got it. So there was this lovely kind of synergy to that. I think it's rather marvelous. But yeah, Ken was BBC put them through and through, and he'd done stuff like the Unedited line and all that sort of stuff. So that was Ken's background, but I was his assistant. So in terms of so you asked about the appearances of Pipes. Some they were scripted, so there was definitely moments, when he's up on the gantry in the studio, and then obviously the reflection in the window in the house. Now that I was there for every day of the shooting. So as art director, I'm also the standby art director. So I'm on camera checking shots and making sure we're seeing what we should be seeing and dealing with the props and the daily prop requests.
Mm.
So I remember all those sequences happening. And I seem to remember the appearance of Pipes in the window. It was just like, well, we can get a good reflection here and we can hide him behind the curtain. So I think the camera moves one way, you see him, the camera moves back, and then
it
suddenly he's
pans
gone.
back. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think he's literally tucked behind a curtain. And then when there's another appearance of Pipes, when they're looking back the other way, and I think he hides behind a sideboard. So it's kind of rehearsed, but it's nothing. I think why people like it is a lot of those effects are very real. They're real effects. There's no count.
Yeah.
There's 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 a artifice to it because obviously you're hiding, getting somebody to tuck down. But it's not like we're CGIing things or anything. It's all
Mm.
a real. It's quite old fashioned actually. It's just very
We're big fans
real.
of practical effects on this show, Ken.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I always call them handomatic as a sort of as a turn of phrase at work. Low tech is yeah, handomatic. Um, so yeah, all those kind of appearances are just, rehearsing the camera position to make sure that when the camera swings round, it's had enough time for the chap to hide behind a chair, basically. But I mean, the little effects in the house with the pooling, the perfect circle of water. Well, I did that, and that's just gelatine. That's just water and gelatine, just in a perfect circle directly under the lamp. The pictures falling off the wall. Well, that's just not clearly a nail from one side being pushed through a wall, and then the same on the other side when the mirror falls off. So
Uh,
that
simple
wall in
beauty.
yeah, that wall in the house is a creation, and that's deliberately put in there. Ken designed that for that very moment, for the two-way moment. The banging of pipes, well, that's me hitting a radiator with a cricket stump. That's all it is. I'm upstairs, they're downstairs shooting the scene. I can hear my cue, and I just hit a radiator with a stick. And then the actors can react to it. So it's all fairly low tech.
How
but
incredible
mar-
that
but
that
marvelous
could
because of
elicit.
it. But marvelous because of it.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
even with the set. So you were talking about the set. So obviously, although I was there when we were dressing the house, I kind of came in at the end a little bit on that. I did do a lot in the girls' bedroom in terms of all the posters and the kind of rearranging all that stuff. So all those Jason Donovan and Bros posters and all that stuff. That was some of the stuff I put up. And then there's a photo that appears as a large black and white photo in the studio of a pillow flying through the air. Well, I'm throwing the pillow and the photographer takes a photo. I mean, it was just the two of us in the room capturing that moment. But I had a bit more involvement with the studio side of it. So you're absolutely right. That kind of talk chat show kind of vibe. It's definitely got a bit of a news night. I've always thought it feels a little bit news nighty.
Yeah.
It feels quite serious. I mean, I think there's the monochrome look of it is very intentional from Ken. I think I got asked about this fairly recently. Do I think it's dated? And to a degree, it has, because the video wall is just the old-fashioned TV cubes, TV sets stuck together. But where I think it's dated is it oddly in the lighting. I think it would benefit. I think the Ghostwatch set, if I was doing it now, would maybe benefit from a bit of color, but not strictly come dancing color. Just a sense of a color, or the mood changing because of a color, which you could
Interest.
very easily do with modern lighting now, with all the LED lighting and moving lights and LED strips and all the rest of it. So you could change the color, because a black and white set means is great because you can put a blue light on it and it will take on a blue hue, or put a red light on it and take on a red hue. So it's actually weirdly, it's designed perfectly to take color, but actually I would imagine that was the producers and Leslie and Ken having conversations, probably not conversations I was party to. They stuck with a very stark, lighting state. I think if it was me designing it now, I'd push for something a little bit more moodier, maybe. Also, the walls with all the images on, they would all be video screens now, probably anyway.
Yeah.
Low tech. What? Sorry, I'm just rambling now, aren't I?
Yeah, feel
As they
free.
say, I'm rambling, and I'm not even dressed for it.
We like
The
rambling.
but the all the images on the walls of the set, all the ghostly images. I mean, that's about as low tech as you can get. We were in the BBC. BBC used to have a reference library for the design department. This is obviously pre-Google and all, Google image searches. And Ken and I found this book on Victorian doorknobs and knockers, bizarrely, but we did. So we were photocopying them, and as we were photocopying them, I think we either accidentally moved one, or we just thought, oh, what if we did this? So in effect, what we did were all the ghostly images are basically photocopies of doorknobs and knockers, and this is a podcast, so I'm trying to describe it with my hands, and obviously this is useless. But basically, we moved the book on the photocopier as it's photocopying, so you get
Right.
this kind of slightly distorted image, this ghostly image. And that's all it is. So the images that are then blown up, and we use this company up in Wigan called Scanochrome, which were a new printing process that was just coming out. I think it had only been going a year, and Ken had read about it somewhere. So they were able to take a photocopy and basically blow it up on a very large scale and print it onto the gauzes. So the set is just a series of printed gauzes. But those images are black and white images of Victorian doorknobs and knockers, and just photocopied and twisted. That's all they are. And it all comes from, I've got my little book with me. Again, I can't, this is a podcast, this is rubbish.
We'll know. We'll
So I
know.
will send you all these bits and pieces, but I wanted to show you, I'm going to show you this, and we can obviously post this. But this was what Stephen gave Ken early on, and I've got the only copy of it, although, so that is the ghost image that's above the fireplace
Yeah.
in the set. And
Yeah.
this was sent, this is what Stephen, because it's written on the back there, it says, Ken, this is the ghosty images. This is the ghosty image as per our phone call from Steve. So that was his reference that he gave Ken that led on to the design. That was kind of it. And if you look at that ghosty images, you've got folds in the fabric. I mean, it is pretty much, it's like somebody with a sheet over their head. That's all it is. But the folds in the fabric on that image, definitely Ken picked up on those. And that's why everything's got a wavy quality to it. Even the floor pattern on the floor of the studio is just a broom dipped in white paint and use like a giant paintbrush to create a sweepy line across the floor. And that all comes from that single reference that Stephen sent Ken.
It's kind of subtly unsettling as you watch it.
I think so. I think so. I think because you're not quite sure what you're looking at. And I think sometimes the best sets are like that. Your eye can't, completely focus on what is it I'm seeing. And also it's quite a lot of chat shows, especially. I used to work on the Jonathan Ross show when it was on the BBC. And a lot of chat show sets, you don't want anything that's going to get in the way of the main reason why you're there, i.e., the person being interviewed and the interviewer. So you don't want anything that's going to interrupt that, because that's what you're tuning in for. You're tuning in to see a face talk to a face. So the set is quite interesting like that. It's all about the focus of those two chairs and the little rug in the middle. Again, the rug in the middle and the two chairs have got wavy backs to them. They're quite high back chairs, which is quite unusual for a chat show. Normally, you don't have anything with such a high back because of lighting, but backlighting. And and also it means when you're cross shooting, you can catch a bit of shoulder in shot. It helps sometimes with eye lines. So they're quite unusual in that regard. But if you look at the shape of the two chairs on the set, they're S-shaped. So again, they're picking up on this kind of curvy thing. Yeah. And then the coffee table's doing its own thing. And then the rug in the middle is a kind of shag pile rug, weirdly. Circular rug, but it focuses the eye. So it's creating a little, a centerpiece, and it's focusing the eye. And then everything else beyond it kind of just drops off. As I said, I think that would be the one thing if I was doing it now, I'd probably make the background a little darker. So it's all about the focus of the two people. But yeah, that's the intention anyway.
Have you, by any chance, seen Late Night with the Devil?
No.
It's it's for all intents and purposes, it's the same premise as Ghostwatch. It's a American-made film that came out last year. It's about a chat show host, where it slowly becomes apparent that supernatural things are happening. Obviously, incredibly indebted to Ghostwatch itself, but that has a very I think it's actually set in one of the old American 60s shows, so that's a very dark reds and oranges, like for
nice.
Yeah. So that's what that reminded me of it as you kind of describe what you would have.
Oddly, for somebody who was involved in this particular program, I'm not a big horror fan.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, well, okay, here's a generational thing. There's a lot of kids growing up my age who saw Salem's Lot on the TV for the first time.
Oh, the Toad Hooper one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think David Soul's in it. Would that be right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Absolutely scared the crap out of me. I mean, big time. And I really can't watch horror films. I really struggle with them. I've seen I've watched The Shining. And I've seen a couple of zombie movies, but they really aren't a genre I can get my head around, and it's Salem's Lot's fault. It really scared the crap out of me.
Was it the bit where the kid starts floating up to the window?
Yeah,
I think that got a lot of people.
Yeah.
Every time. And I know other people who feel exactly the same. And I remember watching it, my little black and white portable TV in my bedroom when if it was late 70s, so I would have been 11, 12, 12, nearly 13. Just scared the shit out of me. I mean, really did. And
it holds up.
It had an absolute lasting impression on me. I really can't go near horror films. They just
So,
the vampire looked repulsive as well.
Yeah.
He looked horrible.
I think
with
Mr. Barlow.
Yeah, Barlow, that was it.
I think given that observation that you're not a big horror film watcher, I'll probably switch one of my questions around to just an observation. One of the things that I've always kind of fought for is the James Wan horror universe, the billion-dollar franchise, including Insidious and The Conjuring. I've always said to people that he's never said it in interviews, but he's incredibly indebted to Ghostwatch, specifically Insidious, which is about a demon that inhabits the bedroom of a young boy in the suburbs. and it's incredibly
Yeah,
stylistically
yeah, whatever you say, yes.
including appearances of the demon in Insidious are almost exactly like Pipe standing in the corner behind the curtain. And
Oh,
You
then,
know
of
what?
course, later on, James Wan would then go on to direct The Conjuring 2, which is based on the Enfield haunting, which Ghostwatch was kind of inspired
right.
by.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the legacy of that.
Well,
Yeah,
the Inside Number Nine boys did the live broadcast, didn't they?
Yes,
of course
yes,
they
that was
did. Yeah,
brilliant. Yes.
That's that's definitely a homage. Well, I know it is. It's a homage to you know to Ghostwatch. It is quite extraordinary, the kind of legacy of it beyond. I mean, what is it now? 33 years it'll be this year. 32, 33 years since it was first
Oh, wow.
broadcast.
yeah, but it was
And I'm doing
92,
I'm
wasn't
doing a I'm doing a talk down in Brighton in October about it, and it was really funny. I did a chat a couple of months ago, and I mentioned it because I was doing a chat about my career, oddly, just to a load of film fans, and I mentioned it, and then straight away everybody jumped on that, um, and I've been invited back. Basically in October to talk specifically about Ghostwatch. So it kind of has this, this this afterlife. It carries on, and sadly I'm the only man standing now because Ken passed away a few years ago, and John, who was the prop buyer, passed away a few years ago as well. So I'm keen to keep chatting about it. As long as
it? Yeah,
people
yeah.
want it. It's I was there, and there was there was a horror exhibition at the Somerset House a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys were aware of that in
No.
London, and they had a couple of my drawings in a glass cabinet. So it's kind of weird, you know what I mean? It's
Oh,
now
wow, that's bizarre.
so I'm now got something that's been in an exhibition. It's
Yeah.
this sort of postscript of it. But as I
It,
said, I've got loads of stuff I will send to you. It's all in here, and there's some other stuff. I've got my copy of the Radio Times still.
Oh
Hold on.
wow.
oh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
if you can,
Oh,
I'd love to
wow.
have a look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've got all that, and then do you guys? I don't know if you're going to include this on the podcast. Richard Lawson, who does the Ghostwatch website Behind the Curtains. Have you ever come
Oh,
across
I'm
that?
yeah,
aware.
yeah,
I think I
yeah,
follow them on social media behind the
Yeah.
curtains. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Rich is just the super fan, and we got talking via Twitter a number of years ago, and I ended up in one of his books being interviewed, and he's just recently interviewed me for a DVD commentary for something, talking about it. But I mean, Rich is really the guy that has kept the flame alive because, I don't know that it would have got its first BFI release if it hadn't been for Rich. And obviously, I know the recent one you've just mentioned, the 4K. I mean, I think Rich has had a lot to do with that, happening. So,
Yeah, I was so
I
happy
love
when
him
that
for
was
that.
released.
I love him for that. I admire I admire people like that who are, who just want to, as I said, keep the fame alive, really. I mean, for me, it was a point in my life, but as I said, it was like 10 weeks from start to finish. And, you kind of think when it's over, you'd never necessarily think about it again. And interestingly, for the first 20 years of its life, I probably hardly mentioned it to anybody, but for some reason, I think with the anniversary of the 30th year looming and also, there's a generation of people I know who grew up with it as well. I think, suddenly I find myself talking about it quite a lot, actually.
Hmm.
I think it's great.
Yeah. What a
So
legacy.
taking us back. So you say, uh, quick shoot, and then you kind of dismissed it to get on with your career, basically, which is completely understandable. However, to take us back to the time, having worked on the project, what was your take on the immediate backlash? Obviously, we mentioned Ghostwatch Behind the Curtain. I've watched a lot of those videos. He features archival footage of people on talk shows saying,
Yeah.
"How could the BBC do this? How could they make us believe in ghosts? How could they traumatize us?" Like, what was your take on that?
I well, I think it's a drama because it's in the Radio Times. The characters are there. It's kind of like I couldn't believe anybody was fooled. I mean, if I'm brutally honest, I saw it. I think I do remember it going. I remember it going out because I think I might have videotaped it. But I was then very busy on one foot in the grave, so I don't really remember much other than maybe bumping into Ken in the BBC corridor and just saying, "Oh, how are you? Oh, yeah, well, that all." That's all kicked off a bit, one thing another. But didn't really give it a second thought. But for me, because the listing is in the Radio Times and it's I think it's either it might even be introduced as a drama when the announcement's made. I just found it very hard to believe why anybody thought it was real. If I'm
I
I
mean,
honest.
only
speaking
recently,
personally, because I was 12 years old, so I didn't. I mean, 12-year-old me didn't read the credits at the beginning to things,
I
so I
didn't
didn't clock that it
either.
was a
Yeah,
dramatization, a drama.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, I think the clever thing was getting Sarah Green in it. I think that was well, Parky, yes, but oddly Sarah Green, because obviously she was on Going Live at
mm,
the time, and I think that was a very smart bit of casting actually to get her in. And she'd done some acting as a child actor, so she's really, really good in it. Craig Charles, actually, they're all really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
in it. They're all
yeah,
really good. Parky's really
Gents,
good in it because he's slightly bemused of what's going on. He's kind of brilliant. It is just brilliant. Do you know that there was a bit in the script, and I really one regret, I threw some stuff away a number of years ago, and I think I threw my script away because I can't blooming find it. But there was a thing in the script about adding a silent, high-pitched tone to the broadcast, so only dogs would hear it. They just couldn't technically make it work. I think that was it. The the limitations of broadcast technology in 1992 meant that they couldn't make it happen. But the heat gun thing that they use is real. That's all. That's a real bit of kit. I do know that. But yeah, what we've said all along, it just very actually relatively a low tech, a low tech way of doing things. But it is a very long time ago. I
it's
mean,
definitely why it's
that's the
effective though
simple
to
thing.
this day.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, actually, you don't see any other than obviously the TV monitors. They haven't got anything like I can't. They haven't got any laptops or anything. I mean, they're certainly not using mobile phones. So,
Mm,
in a way, that's quite interesting because it sort of doesn't date it, if you know what I mean. Because
yeah,
actually, technology is the
mm,
thing that really dates a lot of shows from sort of 10, 15 years ago. I've been watching 24 recently. I never saw it first time, and my other half just said, "Oh, we just give this a go." I think she saw it at the time, and yes, it's great, but actually, what makes it look really dated is all the very old Apple computers and the flip phones,
yeah,
and
the flip
phones, yeah.
phones.
the phones is really funny, because we all had them. I did have a mobile in 92, I think, 90, 92,
One
93.
of the
But
big
yeah.
ones.
I did. I still got it. I've still got one somewhere. Yeah, I did have a brick, not quite a brick. Actually, weirdly, the first time I ever experienced it was at the BBC. So, on the Les Dennis Laughter Show, the aforementioned in 1990, our production manager, we went on a recce, myself and the director, production manager. She took this blooming handbag. It was like this big, and it had a handle and the phone, and it was the curly wire. But you had in the so this thing was massive. Not necessarily, not even a handbag. It was more like a small weekend bag, and weighed a ton. And then you had the aerial that you stuck on the roof, and it was like a 3 foot aerial with a big magnetic disc that you stuck on the roof. And we were able to make phone calls from the recce, which was very exciting. I think the battery in this phone lasted about an hour, but it was very exciting. The BBC owned this piece of technology that we could report back to the office. So yeah, my first experience with a mobile phone was was at the BBC. But yeah, how times have changed now.
Yeah,
Look at us zooming.
Because
yeah, yeah. So, and it works so well. It didn't stop or
Yes.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so I did only have one more question for you, Richard, and it's taken us out of Ghostwatch. Obviously, we spoke a lot about your career, and we're talking now about modern technology, modern production. So you've done a lot of lecturing. Um,
Yeah.
I was searching around for some of your lectures. Obviously, everyone wants to hear from you, especially Ghostwatch fans. You've done some talking at Barking and Dagenham College, I think,
Yes, I
which
did.
is
Yeah, that was my old college. Yeah, yeah. And I did some stuff up in Lipa in Liverpool. Uh, I've done some stuff at Wimbledon, in Brighton, yeah, and my old college here in Worthing in Northbrook. Yeah, bits and bobs and Chichester. I can see it's where I'm probably heading, if I'm brutally honest. I mean, I'm 58 now and I've been doing it 38 years. And, I think maybe 7 or 8 years when I'm 65, that might be time to look for another career. So,
Mm.
but I love chat. I'm very passionate about the job. I mean, that's the simple truth. It was, for me, it was a hobby it was my hobby because I used to do youth theatre as a kid.
No,
And it became my job, because I just fell in love with it at a very young age. I mean, I knew I wanted to do this when I was 16. I'd made my mind up very, very young. I didn't quite know at the age of 16 how I was going to get there, but I knew this is what I wanted to do in my life because I'd done set design, at the local theatre and, was the guy who got the props and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I just like talking about the job. And I mean, obviously, there are, big time movie production designers talking about the job, and there are whole books of behind the scenes on how certain films are made. But oddly, there's not much with terrestrial TV, which is the space I sort of inhabit. I mean, I've dipped my toes with Netflix and and all the rest. Hopefully want to do more of that. But I'm very much a kind of I've been around, with a golden age of TV where I think TV is now, but also I've been around since the 80s, when there was only four channels. When I started in telly, there were only four channels and the fax machine was cutting edge, technology. It's sort of it's nuts to think of, where it's gone. And obviously the thing now is that there are courses up and down the country running production design courses and prop making courses and all this sort of thing. When I was starting out, they were very few and far between. I mean, there are lots of filmmaking courses and and all the rest of it. So it's a thing. It's a big thing now. Um, and I'm I'm an elder statesman. Yeah, I'm an elder statesman, sort of just you know rattling on, and hopefully not rattling on about the good old days, because it wasn't all brilliant. It was also shit.
yeah.
But um, yeah, just I love talking about the job. I like getting students in to do work experience. I've had some students. There's a few people working in the industry that I gave work experience to that are now making their own way. So they're like my little children going off into the world. I love all that. Because when I started out, I did some work experience at HTV in Wales, and I did I did I worked 2 weeks in their film archive, sorting out loads of reels of 16 mm film, and I did 2 weeks with the art department, in HTV. So, I was always very grateful for that experience when I was sort of 20, 21. So yeah,
What
bit
is your
strange.
current opinion of like the current, not so much state, that makes it sound bad, but the current era of artists and designers and what they're kind of doing? Is it exciting?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think movie, weirdly, I don't go to the cinema that often. I do tend to watch quite a lot of films on my TV. I I think the high-end TV thing has definitely um, made cinema sit up and think, and I think the quality of some of the big streaming dramas are extraordinary. I mean, I absolutely adored Conclave recently. I really
Oh
like that.
yeah, yeah.
Visually, it's just stunning. I mean, you've got a lot to work with there. You've got those beautiful red costumes and gorgeous architecture, but there's some stunning photography and art direction. And there's that sequence when they're all running in from the rain and they've all got their brollies up. It's like a
It's
top shot.
beautiful.
Oh, it's just I'm glad that there are moments when I watch TV where I still get excited by single shots and my breath gets taken away and and I'm glad that the world that the industry that I work in as a whole can still excite me like that. I mean, I really adored Andor. I think the Andor series is extraordinary. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm not a Star Wars nerd.
Yeah.
I grew up watching, I was 10 in 1977. So, Star Wars, the original Star Wars, as I like to call it, not episode four nonsense. The, 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 ori- the original Star Wars was my childhood, and so though that film had a massive bearing on me, not in a nerdy way, it just did. I remember watching Star Wars and being amazed by the world of space. I remember seeing The Spy Loved Me, and if you think about, for me, The Spy Loved Me and Star Wars are the two films I saw. One in 1976, one in 1977, I think. Um, those two films, kind of almost back to back, really had a massive influence on me
I can
as a kid.
imagine that those are two
You know,
quite potent films. Fire Love Me
Yeah,
is one of my
amazing.
favorites.
And Spy Love is still my favorite Bond film, and I know Partridge does a whole sketch about it, but it's still my favorite Bond film. Lucky enough to work with Roger, and he signed my poster for me. My Spy Love Me poster. So
Oh, wonderful.
I'm a very happy man. Actually, weirdly, last year, I mean, this is why I love my job, because last year we were wrecking a location in Chelsea. I won't say exactly where, and knocked on the door, kind of cold called this location, and the owner was there. And then we got chatting to him, and it turned out he was the housekeeper, and this house was Roger Moore's house. It was now owned by his son.
Oh, wow.
And so you're on the threshold, and he said, "Oh, that's Roger's old writing desk over there." And I nearly burst into tears. I was so kind of overcome with that moment. Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing, and it's just a blooming desk in a house.
Yeah.
But there was something about him being my Bond, and all of that nonsense. Completely overwhelmed. And the other thing, this is completely off piece. I'm so sorry, but I've got to share. I've got to tell you this. So went to one of the armorers. Part of the art department is dealing with guns and armory. That comes under my remit. A lot of things come under art department. Action vehicles, any food on set, action animals, guns, all comes under the art department. You're sort of overseeing it to a degree. And I went to a hire company called Bacti, who are kind of basically the daddy in terms of hiring weapons. And I went there looking for some stuff for Partridge, weirdly. So that was, what was that, 2020, 21. And while I was in there, I went to a little room at the back behind a big vaulted door, because everything's under lock and key for obvious reasons. And I mean, and then some. It's like a prison. Going back to your bed again. It's like a prison. And I caught this thing out of the corner of my eye, and I just went, "Oh, is that what I think it is?" And the guy said, "Yeah, it is. You can pick it up if you want." Anyway, I'm looking at Han Solo's original blaster
Oh, wow.
that they
Oh.
had. And when he said, "You can pick it up if you want," I burst into tears. I
Wow.
genuinely, I really did. And I'm not I don't like guns. I mean, I'm a real. But there I am holding this, and this was the original one from the original film. Because they've obviously built loads and loads of copies, but this was essentially the first one they made. And it was sold in auction for £1 million. That's the reason why they were getting, they just wanted to get shot of it. No pun intended. Um, and yeah, and I just burst into tears. I genuinely welled up and went, and I had to apologize because I was so overcome with this thing. It's such an icon of my childhood, and my
Yeah.
job puts me in this position. Every once in a while you do pinch yourself. Every time I go to Pinewood Studios, I just think, God, this is bloody amazing. And working at the BBC when I did Ghostwatch, turning it around and bringing it back to Ghostwatch,
Yeah.
it was exactly the same every time I walked through those doors at the BBC. There was something magical about that building, and that building growing up watching all those shows, whether it was Swap Shop or Morecambe and Wise or whatever those shows, dare I say, Ain't Half Hot Mum and some other,
Yeah.
all those shows that you knew were made in that, to walk through those doors was truly magical. But yeah, that Star Wars gun, that Han Solo blaster that moment will stay with me for a very long time, because
Outstanding.
It was really kind of, yeah. It was. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. But there you go. So I won't.
Well, we can imagine.
We can
Well,
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
thank you very much for that. And it was great to hear about your wonderful career.
Oh, mate, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that you're interested. Actually, so that's very very sweet of the pair of you. So thank you. Even though I can't see Gaz, um,
You don't
uh,
want to see me, so it's
oh mate,
honestly.
Yeah,
yeah.
really, we keep him in the other prison downstairs, so that's why he can't have his camera on. Yeah.
He's the Terry Waite of podcasting. Oh God, that's a bit dark. Sorry, it's too
Yeah,
early.
yeah.
All right.
Cut that
Finish it off
out.
with
Cut
something
that. Cut
dark.
that
Yeah.
out. Cut that out.
We've been
They're
darker,
not
don't worry.
showing me in a good light. Cut that out. Yeah. Well, look, I will. Did you send me an email? I can't remember if you sent me an email, but I'll send some pictures. I'll photograph some of this now and just ping it to you.
Cool, thank you. I think I sent
This
you a
this
link
is
to
the
this,
book.
but
This is the book that Rich brought out for the 10th anniversary, and then he did an updated version. And there's an interview with me in that, which is worth. If you're interested in the show, it's worth trying to track a copy of it down.
Oh yeah. What? Yeah, I
It's
yeah,
a
definitely
yeah.
good
want a copy
read.
of that.
He
Yeah.
goes into a lot of detail about stuff, but he did interview me as a kind of a sort of second edition for it. Um, so I'm in that one as well. But yeah, I did a kind of not quite a running commentary for a DVD thing we did quite recently. So I don't know where that's going to appear or whatever, but something's coming
Cool.
with that. And if you're in Brighton in October, come along to this thing I'm doing in October.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, I
okay.
mean, there's no better month for talking about Ghostwatch, is there? I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've done the National Science thing, so they do that every year. And a couple of years ago, Rich
Yeah,
invited me on. So there was me and Sarah and Stephen, and I think Leslie, and we were there at the end for kind of like a live chat thing on Twitter or something we did, which was good fun. But yeah.
cool. Well, any listeners are in Brighton in October, have a look out for this.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
called what's it called? It's called Video Effects. That's it. The talk is called Video Effects, and it's run by a chap called Jack Hallcraft who made the Fatboy Slim documentary, the recent one. So
Oh
he
yeah.
runs
Oh
it.
wow.
Yeah, and
Oh,
then he runs it, and it's a sort of once a month thing called Video Effects, and I think he wants me to go and do it in mid-October.
okay.
He's on
Oh,
obviously all the socials as Video Effects, so anybody wants a ticket nearer the time. Don't want to wish the year away.
yeah. I'll 100% note that down. Awesome.
Oh,
And obviously you've got my website, you've got my Instas, you've got all that stuff if you want to.
yeah. Got your
Uh,
deets, as they say.
Got my deets,
As the children say.
and then the thing the down with the kids, and then the thing that I did before Christmas goes out middle of May, Code of Silence. So that's the next thing that I've done that will be on the telly box.
Okay.
Chelsea Detective is currently showing on Acorn TV, which was a detective drama I did this time last year, and then Code of Silence is going out on ITV, I think the 18th of May. I think they're going to be advertising it on the side of buses, so you won't be able to not see it. I think it's going to crop up. They might even be advertising it at the end of one of the Marvel movies, so I've heard. So I think
Whoa.
ITV are throwing a bit of weight behind it. But yeah, that was the thing I did at the end of last year.
Okay, great. Well, as I write it down to watch myself, I will ask our listeners to also please watch Code of Silence.
Lovely. And when will this podcast go out? When does that get edited? And how are you? When will this go out?
I tend to do the editing, depending on how much time we have tonight, because we have to record the actual episode tonight as well.
Right.
That's going to wrap around this segment. So I'm aiming to get it out this week. It
Okay,
depends
lovely.
on family stuff. I have a kid and stuff. I've got to go and pick him up in about half an hour, actually. But
Excellent.
I'm aiming to get it out in the next few days. So I'll
Amazing.
certainly.
Well, yeah, just send me I follow you guys now, but yeah, just ping me a whatever, and I can
Yeah. I'll
do
absolutely
what I
let you know
can
when
as
it's out
well
there.
to spread the word.
Oh,
Cool,
that'd be
thank you.
great. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. There's a bit of a problem with my scanner at the moment, so I'll just take some half decent phone photos and ping them over to you.
That'd
Oh,
be lovely. Thanks so much.
All right.
that'd be great. Thanks very
Thanks.
much, Richard.
Really nice
Thanks
chatting.
for your time.